Stéphane Lazou will introduce himself better, but he is a Chief Value Officer at Thales. He's authored 9 books on various topics related to how you extract value in pricing and monetizing data. We do have copies of his book as well here for everybody to give away. We'll do that right after.
It's in the
this
bag.
session.
It's in the bag already.
They're already in your bag.
Yeah.
We already have them in your bag. Sorry. Ryan's a step ahead of the game. Monetizing data, but to that end, I think based on the discussions we've already had, it's a perfect segue into our next session with Stéphane Lazou.
Great. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So a pleasure to be with you, and we're going to discuss some heavy-duty topics. So it's going to be a crash overview on best practices in pricing. I could go for weeks and weeks and weeks on topics of pricing, and you'll see it's quite complicated. And we talk about usage, we talk about consumptions and other, critical concepts. But before you get there, there's a huge amount of work that you have to do. And you'll see, so I've studied the field of pricing for 10 years. I was not in pricing before. I was a business executive working for lots of companies. And then I realized that no one pays attention to pricing. So I say, hey, what the heck? I'm going to be, looking at that space, see what's going on. I got a PhD in it. I went 10 years in studying the art and science of value-based pricing, and I still don't know it. It's such a vast field. And on top of it, you look at the digital wave, the tsunami, they call that. And how do you do pricing in the core business is very complicated. But doing that in a digital world is even more complicated. So my role today as Thales is I'm helping the group as an internal expert to become better at what we do and to make sure that customer value is at the heart of everything we do, from innovation, R&D, marketing, sales. We got to have a constant focus on what is it that we're doing for the customer. Why should the customer care, right? And in B2B and B2G, because we do a lot of work in the government world, you do value for our customers is moolah, money, money, money. What are you going to do for me today? We're not buying an app because we're going to have fun all day, or we're going to entertain with movies. We're buying something to make their life better. So either you're going to save them money, you're going to make them money, or you're going to create an emotional connection that is going to generate some kind of a revenue stream or profit. So that's what I do. Every day I go in and out in our 30 divisions, talking and evangelizing about customer value, value-based pricing, monetization, dollarization, all these things that I'm going to touch on today. So I'm going to go very super fast. You're going to get the slides, but you could connect with me on LinkedIn and ask me a question if you have follow-up questions. I'm very visible. You cannot miss me on LinkedIn. So, and pretty much, we're here because your customers really don't care much about that left side. At the end of the day is, what are you doing for me? Why is your analytics program, or why is your IoT, or why is your software, better than the other guy's software? And what does that mean for me? Because at the end of the day, we sell to procurement. And procurement is like, they have one thing in mind is total cost of ownership, or lower price ever, the lowest price ever. So you got to come up with a value prop, a business case, and make sure that you monetize all the things that you have, in your value prop. And you'll see the difference between monetization and dollarization. Those are two different terms. And in the field of pricing, there's lots of different misconceptions about the concepts. What is value, what is price, what is cost. Everybody uses cost instead of price. The same monetization against, versus dollarization. So it needs to be, at the center of the discussion, very early on the product mapping. As you develop software or you develop offerings with software and hardware, someone needs to pay attention to customer value. And eventually, you're going to price. Eventually, you'll design your pricing model based on all the good work that you've done early on. So I like to say that value-based pricing is about 80%, 90% value, 10% pricing. Once you figure out the value stuff, pricing is fairly straightforward. You got optimization, you got packaging techniques, you got modeling techniques, you got bundling techniques. All that stuff is being published, and in academia, they love these formulas and all that stuff. So I'm not worried about the science. I'm worried about the value stuff. And the problem with value is, It's subjective, it's relative, it's future-oriented, especially if you have an innovation that you haven't delivered yet and you're projecting the value for your customers. What is it that you're really doing? So most companies do not have a pricing team. So some of your companies here do have pricing teams, but generally speaking, pricing is the most neglected function of the marketing mix. I just published recently some reports in academia and in practice showing that out of the top Fortune 500 companies around the world, only about 20% of them have a pricing team. It's ridiculous. Would you run a company without an engineering or without an accounting team? I would say no, but so what is pricing then? Is shared between sales and finance and product marketing, and so everybody's doing a little bit of something. Everybody knows they know everything, and at the end, it's a cluster, But what comes out of your, marketing plan is either cost plus, or let's do freemium. I don't know, man. Let's launch something. So, not in software. If you're a pure software company and not, what you do for a living is software, you're going to put a price. But most likely it'll be like, okay, and I've seen, because I've studied pricing so much, I've seen companies really using, how we're going to price that stuff. It's like, yeah. And I'm asking them, guys, you're investing millions and millions and millions in R&D and engineering, and when it comes to price, yeah, sounds good, right? So this is evil. If it's not managed intentionally and with strategy, then it's going to be one of these two. And we're in 2019, and supply chain has emerged as a great profession, and data analytics and IT pricing. It's still So you look at the size of the pricing software space, it's less than $1 billion a year. You look at CRM, we're talking 50 billion, and you're looking at other stuff, CPQ booming, you're looking at sales enablement software, booming, pricing, and they're all losing money like it's crazy. So, let's not get there. But so, my role is to wake up the troops, and including our customers, our partners, and other vendors, and telling them, do not cost all your stuff in digital, in software, in a world that's dematerializing. Do not base your price based on cost. Now, cost is going to be a factor, no doubt. But because everything is reducing in price, you look at the price of IoT hardware today versus what it was 10 years ago, it's a fraction. So if you do cost plus, well, guess what? Your customers know the cost is going down, so they're going to say, well, my price should go down, right? And the cost of developing software goes, is different than the cost of developing software 10 years ago. So all that stuff plays a role. And it's a matter of life and death. At the end of the day, for pure digital players, they have to move away from cost and really establish a strong foundation of customer value. And I'll show you what it means, because it's, everybody talks about customer value. What exactly do you do when you think you're doing customer value? So it is a burning platform. And by the way, competition is not decreasing. Competition is increasing. Startups are well-funded. Everybody's coming out of new concepts. So it's especially in this country, innovation is booming. And if you don't know how you do your things better than competition and what makes you unique, and you'll be surprised how many companies do not know their uniqueness. And Jean was saying it's not about uniqueness, but about sustainable. I know competitive advantage is transient. Right now, it changes very fast. You still do not, you still need to know what are you doing better than your competitors. How is your software better? How's your system better? How much more money can you generate for your customers versus the other guy next door? Customers have choice. Procurement teams know where your competitors are. Procurement is fully automated. There is e-cataloging and all that good stuff. So, competition is not going to go down, and the speed of change is accelerating. So what am I talking when I look at value management? It's pretty much my job description right here on one slide. Start with value creation. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. What is it that I'm doing? Am I creating really a good experience? Am I stimulating my customer's business because I'm very innovative, because my software is solving lots of problems? So we're talking here value prop, the lean canvas and looking at the customer problem, the wow features of your offering. Now, generally speaking, and that's a little bit of an evil in academia, lots of value stops here. I'm creating value, meaning I'm awesome. My customers love me. Well, great, but you still need to compare it to your competitor's value because customers have choice. And then you need to make sure you capture it through price. And pricing then becomes the mechanism to capture the value you've quantified versus competition and create it. And for all of these, you have a set of tools and methods and science and art that really need to be deployed in organizations. Right? It's not just about value creation. It is about knowing what you do better for your customers versus the options. And it could be direct competitor, it could be an alternative, it could be another way of doing things, maybe manual process or two software together, and then at the end, we're going to look at pricing models based on how much value do I create versus competition. The greater the value, the more I can get for me, the more I reinvest in my R&D, and it goes on and on and on. Right? So you look at 3M, right? You all know 3M, right? Extremely high innovation rate, 30% every year, 30% of sales coming from new products. They have an army of pricing people doing value-based pricing and software and optimization, all that good stuff. E-commerce platform, 24% EBIT, goes back in innovation, and the wheel turns, and that's how companies with high pricing power, whether they're in software, the Microsoft of the world and others, are developing, they're unstoppable because that cycles go around and around and around. Now, obviously, it's not as easy as I say it is. You still have to do things well as far as innovation and developing great value props. So, in the book that you get, which I'm not going to go over all of these, you have a framework. If you want to create data-rich offering, what we call a digital offering, driven by data, it's not, pricing is only one of the steps of what I call the 8-step framework. And that book is co-written with Professor Ulaga, who's a guru in value and servitization. So you see, but you cannot just say, hey, here we have a software, we're going to go straight into a consumption, or we're going to go straight into a subscription. Well, who is it for? What's the segmentation? What is the ecosystem? What is the value constellation? What's a buying center? All these things that we traditionally have to do, it's even more complex when we get into software and digital innovation. Not even talking about scaling, designing contracts, service agreements, service support, and managing hybrid pricing models. Getting your finance teams to get, I call that a paper bag when you show them the OPEX model versus the CAPEX model, and they go, oh my God, you're going to switch all my business in OPEX? And it's like, panic attack. So it's a huge amount of, the finance guys, they want the money right away. They want high price and they want no cash flow required. The customers are paying for my cash. It's in the SaaS world, in the transition, it's a little bit complicated. So how do you get there, though? You have to do a lot of work, including a lot of innovation work. So when it comes to digital pricing, I usually focus on 5 priorities, 5 considerations. And I would say, yes, there is a lot of pricing stuff in there, but the number one, if you don't do the number one well, all the rest is wrong. So this is where you put all your money and you put all your attention, and so we talk about the product mapping, the designing of the features, and and at the end it's great, but who's doing the customer research? Who's doing the the willingness to pay research? How do you rank the software attribute based on value, declared value, and all that stuff is up there. Understanding the value in use of your software and doing pricing research to get which one am I gonna, which one are ideal feature versus killer feature. Because otherwise, you put too much in the feature, too many features in the product, and you end up with, lots of stuff that's not getting used, and it burns your cost. So number one is really going deep into understanding your customers, their perception of value, what problems you're solving versus competition, and then the willingness to pay. Then you go into packaging and modeling. Then you set your price. And obviously, we talked about hybrid models before. We exist in the core business, and the core business may have hardware. It may have systems. It may have consumption versus a la carte. So you have to put that in the legacy business, right? how do you put a subscription business in an ERP that's set up for product transactions? And I tell you my experience, it could take up to 6 to 9 months to get the IT guys to load up your subscription in your system. What do you do in between? Write manual invoices or, so it's all these, and then scaling for growth. And I see pricing, in fact, when you do pricing of software or pricing of digital offers, I see pricing as the decelerator or the accelerator of growth. And obviously, I always prefer, stay away from freemium. That's a given. And I think we passed the age of freemium now. We talk about cheapmium, and we talked about free trials and getting a user base. But academic research now is really showing that freemium is evil, and it's very difficult to transition free, especially in B2B, free customers to paying. It's already hard for the B2C guys, some of the music companies, and in the B2B, in the mind of a buyer, if it's free forever. Let's be honest to ourselves. So pricing is really your engine for scaling. The lower you go, the faster you scale, assuming you got all the rest well done. And then if you want to control, some of you talked before about using hybrid and multiple pricing models to entice and accelerate in one way and not in the other way. So there's a lot of work. And the question is, who's doing this? If you do not have a pricing team, or in your innovation and product group, you have no one with real pricing skills, well, it's going to be cost plus. So that means it's going to be difficult to do the first one, right? So let's go, and then what I usually do now in my experience with working with teams, I give them a framework. So if you've used canvases before, it's a great way to get the teams to align around canvases. So you have the lean canvas. I think most of you should be knowing the lean canvas, right? Yeah, I have a thumb there. And then this is a strategizer canvas. Do you know the business model canvas and the value prop canvas from Strategizer? If you don't, I really, encourage you to get familiar with them. So, but in both of them, you have a revenue block, block 6 and block 9. We talk about pricing at the high level, but we don't really give the recipe or some kind of tips. And so what I did is I created a canvas called the Pricing Model Innovation Canvas that we use in Thales to frame our subscription or our digital pricing. Very simple, because we got to keep it simple, stupid, very simple, because you could go very complicated in pricing. What is the customer willing to pay? What do they want? What are their problems? What are their needs? What is competition doing, right? What are our wow differentiators? What are their strengths and weaknesses, right? What's the cost? Obviously, we have to pay attention to cost. And then not forgetting change management. As you become more disruptive in your pricing model, you have to think about educating customers, educating your trade channels. So we haven't talked much about trade partners, but you're selling through them 100%. You want to do a subscription directly to their end users. Be ready for a fight. These people are, they want to survive. Trade channels right now, and I can tell you, it took about 10 years for Caterpillar to kind of design something that worked with their trade partners. So change management internally and externally, including who's selling the subscription, who's selling the pay-per-use, or the performance-based pricing when you're selling hardware. So all that stuff has a huge amount of implications. I have one slide. I don't know if we'll get to that at the end. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is a panorama that I give to the teams, and then we do sprints now. We take if we want to monetize the software, or if we want to find the value of an innovation for IoT or predictive maintenance, then we will use this, and in 100 days or 90 days, we'll frame it, assuming we do all the work. Then it's always so. I don't know if you know, if you don't follow me, I publish comics making fun of a lot of different people, including lots of comics on pricing. And right now I have a lot of stuff on digital because there's so much smoke and mirror in digital that it's funny to a certain degree. So this is typically what happens in big companies like ours, frankly, and others. We go and we do all the tech work, right? We'll test, we'll do hackers will penetrate our software, and then when it gets to talking to the customer, it's like, okay, we don't need the customer, right? we'll launch it. And that happens also in pricing. So willingness to pay, well, I don't think we have time. And it's, really it's garbage in, garbage out. We need to have, as we invest in our product portfolio and our software roadmaps, we need to make sure that we have a little money to run willingness to pay research. And right now, I can tell you it's very cheap. You could do that with Qualtrics. You could do that with existing software, research software that would have a willingness to pay feature. All you need is a couple of hundred respondents, and you test your willingness to pay. But you think that doesn't exist, and this is why a lot of digital innovations today are failing, because we're not spending enough time out of the building talking to customers, or all the money goes into prototyping and writing codes and in these very expensive digital factories that we have, and who's doing the customer stuff. So it starts, the first of the 5 considerations is about knowing your customers, and this is not new. This is front end of innovation. This is customer insight, and obviously if you only have 20 customers in B2B, then you're going to do qualitative interviews, in-depth panels. But if you have a lot of customer base, you could run advanced statistical models like conjoint or willingness to pay research, A/B testing online. So all that stuff is pretty well adopted in B2C. Again, these B2C companies, they've gotten it. They do it very well. And it's moved to the pure SaaS base. Most companies in the SaaS world are doing this, are using these techniques. As soon as you move into the equipment, manufacturing, heavy industrial, then it goes away. And then pretty much, you all know the 4 Ps of marketing, right? Traditional 4 Ps goes down to 3 Ps. Pricing evaporates. And this is where you hear like, oh, I don't control pricing. The market tells me what price I should price at. And that's where you go like, so I'm considering myself a Kung Fu master because, at the end of the day, I'm going into very traditional teams in marketing, product teams, and tell them, hey, guys, someone needs to look at all these things. And it's cheap right now. 10 years ago, you used to do like telephone interviews and like send questionnaires by hand. Right now, you could get set up to do interviews, like 200, 300 customer surveys in 2 days. It's set up. It's done. It's like, what's a big deal? $5,000, you get a panel. So we talked about the value metric before. That's essential. And one of the big reasons why all these digital and software initiatives are not as successful as they could be is because we're maybe not matching what's important for the customer, what they're trying to do, the outcome of the customer business, what's in their P&L, how do they think in their day-to-day life, and we try to force to them a metric of pricing that is not adapted to the value metric. Now, you may have multiple value metrics. We mentioned that earlier today, but in essence, you want a perfect match, right? If the customer thinks in terms of, I'm buying tires for my car and I'm going to drive, I'm thinking in number of kilometers that I'm doing, I'm going to charge him by kilometer. This is why we have engine by the hour and we, fly by, and now the tire companies are starting to charge by kilometers. So that's where you get into really deep understanding of how the customer think. And this is important to know what they use in the software. This is what the beauty of tracking the usage is. You really see the trend, what's important to them. So that's essential. That's a base. Then you get into the packaging. So different choices. I cannot go in all of them today, but I can tell you, you look at the SaaS world, most 75 to 80% of companies use good, better, best as a package. And I'm sure a lot of you use good, better, best. And then you get a decoy, which is very high price, and you could put a freemium for a while. All that stuff is psychology of pricing. But you look at the reports coming out of SaaS, is good, better, best is the most used. The key is, what do you put in the good? Because you cannot put all the bells and whistles in a good. You got to keep some for the best. So you have enough fencing between the options so that people kind of look at making an exchange between the price of the good and the value they get, and then the price of the better and the value they get. So usage is important because you say, well, here you get 50 hours or you get 50 reports, here you get 25. Well, how do you know it's 25 or 50? Well, you have to know the usage of your customers, and that's why you use the usage to repackage your offers, and then you do that over time, so it's not static. Because obviously the more adoption you have, the more people will use in the good, so that's going to go up, but you have to make sure you add value in the best. So that is never static. And in our world, things can get obsolete in 6 months, 3 months, because competition is also moving. And new startups popping up and then destroying our value prop. So one of the common mistakes I see is one price for all. They're all getting the same deal. And that's a symptom that they haven't done segmentation. And segmentation it's a curse and it's a blessing at the same time. It's very difficult to do. It's very difficult to operationalize. And if you fail badly. But if you do it very well, it gets you a very, very awesome good, better, best. This is the people who want the peace of mind, turnkey, and they want to buy the bells and whistles of your software, the full maintenance included, everything. Give me the TCO, and I'll sign a contract for 10 years. This guy, want okay, you talk about cybersecurity, I want to just be compliant. Make sure there's no hacking going on, right? But I'm not going to pay $1 more than, So, and in the middle, and then you could put a super expensive here to bring them in the middle, right? And the rest is a la carte pricing, different types of bundles, and one size fits all is evil. So one of the critical things is,
So just quickly, what is your suggestion for how to get around the fact that your current pricing model biases the data you're getting because people are adjusting their consumption to however you're charging them today?
Yeah, but you have to, first of all, you have to know what they're using. This is and you look at your customer base. So as they scale, they're going to use more. You got to start looking at your package every 3 months. Your package change, and you're going to vary the and you may introduce a fourth group. If you see that they're ramping up very fast and they start consuming a lot, that means you design maybe your package is too in the wrong way. You have the wrong trigger levels, right? And it's okay. I mean, you look at some of these companies, startups, they pivot their pricing every 6 months, and it is what it is. So you need to be able to track usage. You need to see the average usage of each feature and what's in it, what's required, what's not required, what's in because you're going to have features across the 3 packages as well. So that's evolving very fast. And my recommendation is typically in the subscription, you revise it 2 or 3 times a year, your subscription price. That's a lot.
And so that means that anyone who's on the old price continues till their subscription runs out, and then.
Well, it depends if you're a startup and you're ramping up. I mean, you're going to have cohorts of customers coming in. Your existing customer, you're not going to. They're anticipating that your price is going to go down, or at least the price will be stable, but your package will be richer, right? And you're assuming that your cost is going down as well. The more users you have, the easier it gets to, so you're getting to scale very fast. So that's a point. But I would see it would be difficult to change your price up every 3 months unless you totally screwed up your pricing up front, like Netflix, and they're trying, they've tried for the last 10 years to change their pricing, but you can't double your price overnight and expect your customers are going to be like, even if you tell them, oh, still a lot of value. Nope, I'm not paying more, especially in B2B. So you're increasing your churn. You'll see very quickly the churn that you're going to get. So one essential step is to look at, picking the right features in your packages. So this is typically what you would look at, leader, filler, killer of the features, and you go down and say, well, you don't want any killer in your packages. You want to remove the killer. The famous example is coffee in the McDonald's bundle. You don't want to be coffee. Coffee is a killer, attribute feature because people don't like coffee. Some like it, some don't like it. I like coffee. I don't get Starbucks coffee. I don't get McDonald's coffee. So you're going to focus on the leader here. The green are the one that are going to lead the value of your offer. And these are the ones you need to pay attention as far as packaging up and down in the good, better, best, right? So this is done through customer interviews. And then if you do that versus competition, you would have to make sure this is relative to competition. Because remember, software, there's a lot of competition in software, so customers have options. They have on-premise from other guys, they have SaaS, they have free, open source, all kinds of stuff. So, and then not to make it too complicated, there's different types of pricing models. And we talked about this morning. How much is that a fixed pricing model, versus a fully variable pricing model, consumption or variable, or how much is that going to be in the middle? And these are typically the 8 pay-as-you-go, hockey stick. So I can't go on all of this, but Simon SKP is a great pricing consulting company out there, and we do a lot of publications on this. This comes from them. But that's a decision someone has to make. And again, once you pick a pricing model, it's not like you're going to be able to change it overnight. You'll change it, when you maybe upgrade the major versions of your software. But generally speaking, if you're in subscription, you're going to be in subscription for a while. Now, you could say I'm in subscription and I'm adding a usage fee for XYZ feature. That's acceptable. And that's a little bit of the risk of a recurring business model. If your price is wrong at the beginning of the recurring business model, your price is wrong for many years. In the transactional world, if you sell your product at the wrong price once, you can always increase the price and change it. But if you've signed a contract for a subscription for 2 years, then that's it. This is why Netflix, technically Netflix is, you may disagree, but they're bankrupt. Because their cost of content and their cost of acquiring content has gone through the roof, and they can only charge $1 more every time they, 50 cents more. It was too low. The price is too low, people, from the very beginning. And right now they're struggling. So, another dimension that we talked about in the first slide is setting up your pricing level and your pricing structure. Someone needs to make a decision on how you're going to price, your usage-based or your outcome-based. So there's pretty much 4 types of, to keep it simple. There is fixed amount transactional, CapEx oriented. There's going to be a subscription, they're going to be usage-based, and they're going to be performance-based, outcome-based pricing, which is more complex from the legal perspective. Performance sharing agreements are never easy, and you need to be able to track that as well in your system, and it's, wow. But when you're going to set up your pricing level and your structure, you have to decide how many discounts do I give, what's your authority of discounting for my salespeople, how far can they go, so you have to have guardrails, you have to have guidelines, and you need to be able to track. So we talked about tracking. If you do a performance-based pricing contract, or if you do a usage-based, you need to have the usage data if you're going to invoice these customers. So, someone needs to agree on the term usage, and it's even more complicated. We do in Thales performance-based contract with the military, and the contract usually takes 2 years to negotiate because, you got to get an agreement on what's performance, how do you reach the KPIs or not, all that stuff is complicated. This is why I have the oh my God right here. And again, this cannot be improvised. So you see the complexity from the packaging to the modeling to making the decision of price. If you have a good, better, best, and then discount level, tier volume levels, bundles, you may introduce some bundles. It's fairly complex. So in a world where you have already an existing business, so if you're transitioning your business from perpetual to SaaS, or if you're selling hardware plus software, you got to manage 2 worlds. You got to manage your existing world where you have list price, transactional pricing, and you got to manage the digital world, the software world, where you're going to have potentially different pricing levels. So you may say, I'm going to sell you a machine, right? Maybe the finance guys will let you give a machine for free once in a while, but generally speaking, they want to sell something like a server or on a piece of equipment. And then besides this, I'm going to do a perpetual license plus a usage-based fee per report. So here, before you know it, you have 3 pricing or 4 pricing levels to manage in your ERP. And that's where it gets a little tricky. Because when you integrate the old versus the new, the legacy versus the new, what we call innovative pricing model, you got to look at all of this. You got to manage multiple value metrics, multiple data points of pricing, multiple customer segments. And this is not to be underestimated. Your IT team needs to be on board at the very beginning. So it's not like you out of the blue, I'm going to say, hey, you know what, we're moving to subscription. Tomorrow we're launching. Read about the Adobe transition story between perpetual to SaaS. It was a bit complicated. There's a period of time where the transition is complicated and everybody needs to be on board. Legal, IT, finance, the CEO, not obviously forgetting the shareholders, because there's going to be something called the swallowing the fish effect. You have heard of the swallowing the fish, right? You're pretty much, instead of selling up front, you're selling for a long duration of time, and your cash flow is taking a beating in the meantime. So lots of consideration to integrate all of this into your existing infrastructure. Now, keeping in mind, imagine if you're managing pricing, well, okay, you have a pricing team. There is your IT team has a pricing team, because a lot of some companies do have IT pricing people, the one managing the price optimization engine and the pricing master data file and that stuff. So they'll work with you, and it'll be a smooth transition. But if no one manages pricing, or you have one or two Indians with a pricing hat, or sharing pricing and cost, typically your cost modeler and the pricer, who's going to do all that work? And I have a famous not a success story, of a big industrial company that launched they're doing metal cutting equipment, little things for the metal cutting industry, and they launched a software. And it took them 9 months to create a bill of material for the software, to put it in the ERP. So for 9 months, they have the software, they couldn't invoice it. Well, if you tell that to your salespeople, what happens? It's free, right? And well, when they finally put it in the ERP, that's it. It's free forever. Freemium is evil. No, seriously. I mean, we work hard for, for our companies. Yep. Who?
A company called Atlassian. Look up the stock ticker T.
Yeah.
And then explain how Freemium is evil. It's $1 billion revenue company without a sales force.
Yeah. So.
I'm just asking, as a curious, and Mr. Market has priced that very nicely for their shareholders.
So there's freemium and freemium. Google, you could argue Google is, in a way, a freemium model, because we use it for free, and someone else gets paid. There's a lot of different monetization stream. But at the end of the day, a pure freemium model is not. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. That's all you're going to do, and you're going to get paid. So unless you develop an advertising or an agency type of revenue model, that's fine. But I haven't heard a lot of success stories. So there might be an anecdote or two that, but generally speaking, you look in the SaaS world, it's difficult to, you transition probably 5% of your free users into paying users.
What's an example of a pure freemium enrollment? So that we're looking at it through your lens.
Well, free is like you don't know how to invoice, you give it away for free, and then maybe you'll tell the customers, I'm going to invoice it later. But a free is really literally, I give a software, I sell a TV, and there's a software that goes with it, and the software comes for free with the TV. So it's not free because it's in the premium. Hopefully there's a premium in the TV, but it's something you get for free. So the first step is probably start to invoice for zero. I would say start putting, there's a software, it's value 500, and then discount because you bought the TV, 500, zero to pay. But in the mind of the customer, it's free. I'm getting it for free.
Sometimes you're forced into a situation where you have to have different tiers of your software.
Oh, sorry.
Basic, advanced, what have you.
Yeah.
And maybe the basic is free and the advanced, is where you monetize. One example of that is if there's either market dynamics where the base functionality has to be open source, for example, and it has to be free, and then you have to, as a company, struggle to get advanced tiers that you then, go monetize on top of that. So sometimes there's a platform dynamic where the platform has to be free because it's open source or whatever, and then you have to, create advanced tiers on top of that. Sometimes you can't avoid that either due to boneheaded decisions by your leadership or market dynamics or whatever else.
Yeah.
What's your view of open source models like Red Hat?
Wow, I'm not an expert in that, so
Let me.
someone I'm sure can.
Yeah. So they're a service organization. I think Mike was just saying that they're not selling a product; they're selling a service, basically. So you're paying for the support component, not really the product, because the product is open source, as you know.
So freemium is a customer acquisition strategy.
Yeah, it's not a pricing model. Yeah.
Right, so then you've got to be, you know, you've got to have a second thing, whether it's
Yeah, yeah.
advertising or a different tier or whatever, right?
But this is why we're moving away from freemium to cheapium. You know, at least you set up the customer, they're going to pay something, you know, $1,000, $500, or $2, or but at least you set them up, you get them used. It's not zero value. So there is a great handbook on freemium by Pricing Intelligently, pricing-wise, they're called. And it's a great handbook on what not to do in freemium. It's easy to find.
But doesn't freemium by definition mean there's a second thing? The emium part? Like, if not, it's
Yeah.
called free.
Yeah.
So freemium implies that there's some other monetization above a free core.
In general, I think you're right, but I think Stefan makes a good point about, you know, Google, right? Which is they give you something free and you're giving them something for free.
Yeah.
Which they can then go monetize it. And there may be other situations where you can do that. But like I said before, I think the most common situation is you're stuck in a situation where the basic tier has to be free, and then you have to have the second thing, a higher tier or something like that.
Or you work in a platform, so it's big in digital platform, you give it the access for free, and then, you know, obviously there's going to be lots of players exchanging, transacting, you get paid, someone else is paying you, but the users are accessing for free.
Yes, so imagine a two-sided model where you're selling the platform for free, but you're getting a cut of each transaction or something like that, right? So that could be a model.
I have a question right here.
Free, I just looked them up, I didn't see zeros next to all their.
The point is that the traditional definition of a freemium model is not free. It's that there's a free entry point. So, right, come download this, try it
Yeah.
for whatever period of time, and then start paying.
That's my point, I
Yeah.
agree with the gentleman.
No, but a trial would be temporary. This is permanent.
Free part is temporary, you use it for a while, then you get a fee later.
No,
It could be permanent if you've got something else you can sell on top of it.
I have a comment right here, a reaction right here.
So I agree with the gentleman over there. I mean, we have products, several, and we're actually breaking new ground or actually embarking on new frontiers. I mean, we're not going to charge for something that people have never seen in their life, like 512-bit symmetric encryption with a dialable strength. We put it out there and limit that. They see it, they're exposed to it. Of course, there's an upsell and a pay later for better and premium services, but we have to put it out there first, and it's working. It's actually outperforming our metrics.
Yeah, but the whole business model is not freemium. You do have a plan, you have a good, better, best, you have all the things you're selling, and you have a roadmap to transition
Yes.
eventually. So, like, where is he? He was saying, you know, it's an acquisition, you know, process, and you train them, and eventually, if you have an outstanding value proposition and they love it so much, we got to pay. The thing is, you look at the experience in B2C, it's a small fraction of companies are paying, people are paying. So in the B2B world, there's not enough data points at this point to say, well, is it 5%, 20% that you can convert? And maybe you can, you know, eventually tell us one day how much did you convert or stayed with a. But if you do a good segmentation, that should help you, you know, project. Some of the premium, you know, some of the more premium willing to pay accounts may try it for free for 90 days, and then they're going to pay, or a higher portion of them will pay.
Yeah.
The thing is, going for free and for a while, you need to have a plan. You need to have a plan for the future. You can't stay free for forever. So good, better, best. Good will be free, and then the better and the best, which will be monetized. So if you want more information, you can, you know, I can send you that handbook. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll give you the PDF. It's actually quite interesting.
I got a question. Is there a model such that your whole goal is just to acquire customers so you can get acquired by another company?
Yeah. Like lots of companies not making money and having outstanding valuation because they have millions of users.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's you know.
I mean, your whole goal is to exit, getting acquired, right?
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah, and then some companies will make. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's VC.
Yeah. So.
But it's VC's money. What do I care, right?
I'm making,
Doesn't work.
you know, I'm making generalizations, but you know, some companies are successful in freemium, others are successful in being acquired. So, but generally speaking, you look at the trends. You know, there's a high level of failure in freemium business models, And for the longest time, we didn't know if Facebook would be able to monetize. Twitter, are they going to be able to monetize something out of their freemium free platform? In my world, in the B2B world, in the industrial world, you better make some money very quickly, because otherwise your bosses are going to, the street is watching you, and your bosses are going to be a bit upset, especially if you're creating a loss and then you're eating up cash flow, which never goes well in large companies like ours. So, and this is one, it's a good segue to the scaling of your pricing. There's a lot of amount of discussions you need to have when you're transitioning from one pricing model to the other. Cannibalization, the financial implication, working with trade channels, intense customer education, because now you're changing their world. They're used to buying maybe hardware or products from you or perpetual license, and now you got to re-educate them on their cost and the usage of the product. Obviously, I always recommend to have the great back office with the right, automated, supply chain around entitlement and other, critical dimensions of software, and all that stuff. I mean, I could go on and on. I have whole chapters about, about what could go wrong, because, frankly, lots of companies are struggling with the transitions between. They're struggling with the value of software. They're struggling with the transition between perpetual and SaaS, and they're struggling with innovating in pricing models. And that requires, like anything else, requires great tools, great capabilities, and some good discussions. And those are going to be multifunctional. So the product group have to work with the pricing group or the innovation group, the customer research, and all making educated decisions around the 4 C's that I mentioned before. And you can't just look at cost and forget about your competition. You have to look at the 3 C's, the same way, and pay attention to change management. So all that story is in the book that you got, and I hope you can read it, because there's a lot of different case studies from some of these big companies like Honeywell, Siemens, and us about how we've done it successfully to transition and create a digital innovation with new pricing models. It's fairly complex, and that's it. So this is my information on LinkedIn, and open for questions. More questions if you have some.
Yeah. You made a
No, that will be given to you in a USB stick. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So you made a comment earlier about advocating changing pricing and packaging multiple times a year. And I'm interested if we focus for a moment on the large enterprise space, where a non-trivial amount of the revenue is coming through multi-year ELAs.
Yeah.
And if you believe that even in that space, pricing and packaging should be changing multiple times a year, and if not, what do you think the right cadence is of pricing and packaging updates in that sort of large enterprise, and in particular on-prem market, because the SaaS market is different, but
on-premise,
traditional large enterprise software?
Well, that would not be the case of changing. You can't do dynamic pricing when you have, long-term contracts and established contracts. But, I think you have renewal periods, you have upgrades, and typically, some of the things we talked about before, the more you can innovate during the contract period, then you can upsell, and that is a pricing change in a way, including you could potentially drop your price. That's, the price always, do not always go up. At some point, you got to look at the overall pricing power you have with an account. But I wouldn't recommend to change price 3 times a year if you have a contract, unless you have change mechanism in the contract where you get thresholds and you have that's automatically generated through ERPs. So what, sorry? Yeah.
So I think Stefan makes a good point about, if you innovate, you can charge more for that. There's been some recent, research and studies showing that in situations where you have a very long sales cycle and you have a sale as a result of an intimate relationship between the salesperson and the customer, pricing change is not going to affect the elasticity, for example, or demand very much, because of the nature of that, the complicated, intimate nature of that relationship. If you have a purely consumer-based offering, you may see you may see elasticity effects from changing price and what have you, but not necessarily in the very large commercial kind of long sales cycle situations.
And did that look at pricing only or packaging? Because I would think, from my experience in that space, while the pricing may not have as much of an effect, if you start changing your packaging of your features and stuff on them, your sales cycle is just going to go out into oblivion on that stuff, because the lack of stability in the offers is a killer, even if you have a relationship with the customer.
So I advocate transparency, and everything that you do has to be data-driven, obviously, you know, and so you don't make very abrupt decision in pricing, in changing pricing models and packaging. Pricing levels, price increases, you know, new customers coming in, you branch out a different segment, you could, you know, definitely innovate and do something else, but you have to be careful and not totally confusing your customer base with pricing changes. And look at, I mean, a famous example is the price of Tesla. Elon Musk, in a period of 4 months, changed pricing like 4 times, and people were like, oh, how much am I paying for that car? 2,000 and 3,000 and no, 35, and then it went down to 28. It's like, dude, stop changing my price. So it creates confusion.
Yeah, and I think, you know, not only do you suffer a customer confusion, you suffer sales force confusion as well, and that's probably your bigger problem, and depends upon the culture of your sales force, right?
And your channels.
Yeah, not even get into channels,
Actually, in the appliance world, in the transactional appliance world, right, it used to be that there is a fixed pricing, and it's also based on the cost plus or whatever it is. Now, some of these companies are introducing a term-based pricing even for the hardware. So you get the hardware for 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and after that, it just stops working, right? So in that case...
You mean control obsolescence? Is that what it is? Like
I mean, they have the license, they have a software.
It stopped,
It's a term-based, it's an appliance term-based subscription, right? You see it on, you know, Meraki with the devices, or, you know, SD-WAN devices. In that case, can you do the same pricing changes, or is it advisable to do the pricing changes after, you know, say every 3 years or every 1 year you can change the pricing? Or how do you see that?
Generally speaking, in that case, I would change, if you renew, if you have annual or 3-year terms, you change your price as you renew. But the machine, at some point, the machine ages. So if you can maintain the performance of the machine and appliance, eventually, I don't think they last.
Just to explain the situation with Meraki, the customer purchases the hardware. But when the subscription expires, it has no useful software on it that actually works. So even though the hardware works, it in effect, you know, is dead because there's no useful software on it.
Exactly. So after 1 year, you can come up with a new feature, or, you know, your advanced software, and then you can actually increase that pricing at that point. So every subscription interval, you get a chance to increase the pricing, but the hardware remains the same, right? So is that...
Yeah, so what's the value? Then I look at this, what is the value of renewing then? You know, if I'm buying the machine and I know I'm going to get stiffed with a price increase, and if there is no value to me, I dump that on the corner of the street and buy something else. So if you increase the price, I usually recommend that it's got to be an increase in value somehow, and you make it a win-win exchange. So it's got to be better functionality through an upgrade of price, upgrade of software. Machine runs faster, more efficient, less noise, I don't know. But if the hardware gets older, you know, I don't know what you can do. So personally, I would not be in the target segment to buy that stuff. Some people don't like ownership. They don't, you know, some people don't want to own anything. Right now, we're talking about the age of subscription. In that case, you're buying the hardware. This is what's...
Yeah, I mean, in the hardware space, there's lots of complicated pricing situations. In this case, Meraki's offering a cloud-based management solution for the hardware. So the subscription is really on the security portion and the cloud-based management.
Sure.
So if you see the value on the cloud-based management, presumably you would renew it, right?
But the next upgrade will be even better. So you will renew because of, not for the hardware, you will renew for the benefit of the...
Well, I mean, hopefully as a cloud-based solution, it would be getting better anyway. Even before you upgraded it.
So if you want to, I know I need to wrap up, right? If you want to, you leave this I know it was a lot of information. Remember, the value has to be at the center of everything. You need to pay attention to the 4 Cs. You can't improvise on, changing your pricing models and your pricing packages. And if you don't know, encourage your teams, ask these questions in your team when you develop the next generation of software, or you work on your roadmap for features and next development. Who's making these decisions? Based on what? Is there data, customer data? Because at the end, I think pricing is high reward when you do it well, but it's high risk if you do it wrong. So thank you, and I'll be around for more questions.